excited to welcome back one of our favorite and most knowledgeable guests when it comes to handicapping college basketball, Mr. Kyle Hunter from Hunter Sports Picks. You can follow Kyle on Twitter at Kyle Hunter Picks. Kyle, welcome back, man. It's been a whirlwind of a winter, but here we are. We are like at the end of February already, my man. How are you?
Man, it is crazy. It goes so fast. You know, we're this close to March Madness. It's just a few weeks away. College basketball's on center stage now. You and I have been paying attention to college basketball for a long time, Kiev, but some people just kind of getting in there after the NFL and the NBA was on the All-Star break, and now we got a lot of attention being paid to these college hoops games.
Oh, without a doubt, man. It's the handles went up for sure on these college basketball games, and it's going to keep going up into March Madness. Everyone's going to have brackets. There's going to be all these fun games, and everyone's going to think they know more than everybody else as usual. But it's fun to talk about, man. It's fun to get perceptions, and you always have disagreements, which is fine. And things can get a little tricky for people when it comes to these big games. There's upsets that happen, and you just kind of want to stay ahead with the best line value you can get, right? That's what we try to do every day, and that's why you're always working so hard at night to find that line value before a lot of things go and change. But man, lots to talk about. And since it's late in the season here, I want to ask you about any trends, any late season trends coming up here that you might want to talk about. I pulled up a few ones from covers, but Easy Baby says, "What's up, Kyle? And what's up, Kia? What's up, man? Glad you could join in today, man."
Yeah, what's up, man? I've seen you on the Bet US College Basketball Show as well. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. I'll try to cover a couple of the games that you're interested in as well. But yeah, Kiev, I think it's been more of an over year. The overs have done better than the unders so far this year. We've kind of talked about that, I believe, kind of off the air. Like, there's been a lot of fouls called this year. Efficiency is pretty high for offenses based on the way this game is being officiated. It has kind of normalized here of late. And Kiev, that, conference tournament season is usually pretty decent for under bettors. I wouldn't go based just on the long-term, long season trends here. I do think that, the home dogs haven't done as well as some people would expect here this year in college basketball. But late season, I do have some trends here I want to share as far as what's been good consistently. I kind of like to look. And we don't want these trends that do really good one year and the next year they just completely fall apart. Trying to look for some consistency. First off, we look at late season, and I guess this is very late season overs between two teams who aren't very good. So, Kiev, we think about this a little bit. You're a team that's middling or bad team. It's the very end of the regular season. What do those games mean to you? Because the only games that really matter to you after that are the conference tournaments, because you're not going to make March Madness because you're not very good unless you win your conference tournament. So you pack it in those last 3, 4, 5 games of the regular season. Some of the smaller conferences are in those last 3 or 4 or 5 games. So pay attention to the schedule. But game 28 or later is what I've got for this query. With mediocre or bad teams, I went ahead and put this so that it would be fairly broad. Less than 60% win percentage for both teams. So they could at least be mediocre teams, decent teams, or worse. The angle does get better for the worst teams. So keep that in mind. But totals of 137 or lower. So it doesn't work as well if you just go in there and you bet, over 160 because two teams are playing badly. We know, Kiev, those really high overs, all it takes is one stretch of not scoring and you would lose that one. But 137 or lower with teams of 60% or lower win percentage, 339 and 251. That's 57.5% to the over. The thought here is the teams don't care too much. There's going to be less defense. People are still happy to score points. I mean, who doesn't want to pad stats? So I think that's a good angle. It's consistently. I'm looking at the chart right now, Kiev. It's one year after year. So
did you say less than 60% winning percentage? Yes. On that query? Okay, you can see teams like West Virginia, that would fit that. They're 9-17, a bad team, but you know what? Probably they think a little more NBA like. It's like, okay, I'm not going to play some defense, but I want to show some offense, show some dunks, try to get some fast breaks. Maybe they're quicker to run the court to get that quick turnover, rebound, long pass, and make that fast break score, Kyle, rather than staying back and rebounding themselves. So that's a great point. I mean, there's a lot of teams that fit that bill. Oklahoma State might be one of them. They're 12 and 14. They tried to play some defense throughout the year, but just their last game against Cincinnati, 156 total points, and against BYU, it went to 176. So this is kind of just showing you that some of these teams are just caring a little bit about what's scoring, and maybe it works for them sometimes too. So keep that in mind. Another thing that you can look for is just coaches that kind of gave up. Now, I didn't want to query on this, but there's some teams that with some pretty bad coaching, and I have to throw Michigan in there. Michigan is a massive fade team probably right now. I don't have to say that. I've talked about that earlier in shows, but Juwan Howard, I don't know why he's not being fired mid-season like Holtman. It makes no sense to me. He should have been gone, and now they still have McDaniel being suspended on his away games. They just lost the guy for the season. I think it was Terrence Williams, or was it? It was one of the big names, Nakamura. It was one of those two that hurt himself, right, Kyle? And so they're going to be a big fade team, and this team might have kind of given up until the conference tournament as well.
Yeah, they've had some suspensions where that McDaniel was suspended just for road games. That was a weird setup. Now the injury. Michigan, it seems like, they could have one good game here or there, but I don't think I would consistently trust them. Mark, what's up, man? Mark's a good guy. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys to see a decent amount of people here watching live. So appreciate that. Fun chatting college hoops with Kiev. Kiev, always have a great time chatting with you. This is, I'll tell you what, Kiev. So let's look at the opposite side of this too, though. We've got some teams. Yeah, I agree with you, by the way, on the teams that can be faded that have just kind of given up. Before I move on, I'll say I'm kind of scattered trying to think about so many things here, Kiev. You know how this time of the year is. But
Sure.
Before I leave that thought, I do want to say I do think some of these teams lay down at the end of the season. I was going to say the under trend next, but I think based on what you're saying right here, I need to kind of play into what you said. The very big favorites late in the season. I'm not a big fan of laying 15 or 20 points, and I know you're not either, Kiev. But this is a pretty tight angle where it's laying 15 points or larger, game number 25 of the season or later. So very late in the season, and playing against a team with an ATS cover percentage of 50% or higher. So this team has actually made money for bettors that you're betting against, and yet they're a dog by 15 or more. So you're betting on a team that's a big favorite, but they have to be playing a team that's not great, but they've also still covered the spread at a pretty high rate. This is really impressive. 77-30 in the last 107.
Wow.
Really good stuff. There's not too many of them that will fit this because usually teams that have covered 50% against the spread or more are not going to be dogs of 15 points or larger. But when you see that kind of spot, I mean, it could happen. Now, a team like Michigan's not going to be that because they haven't covered the spread high enough. But there are plenty of teams that aren't great that have covered big spreads as a dog. It's a small sample here, 77-30 in the last 107, but it's plus 4.41 points on an average ATS margin. That's every single game, including the losses. That's pretty good. So that kind of margin like that suggests to me that this is not just a fluke. It's not some kind of, just really small sample where it doesn't matter. So that kind of plays into what you're saying there, Kiev, is that you can get some of these late big favorites that actually are worth playing. And it's always tough for me because I'll get my possible plays and write them down old school style. And, I see a minus 17 Kiev and I'm like, oh man, I hate to lay 17 points. And then afterwards, the team wins by 30 points and you feel pretty stupid for not taking it. But it is something that you shouldn't be just scared off from the huge numbers late in the season because these can work out pretty well. I'll just go on into the other one that I had too, Kiev.
Sure.
We talked about late overs. Let's also talk about late unders between two good teams. So I was really interested when I ran this query a little bit ago, Kiev. the late unders between two good teams have done far better in games with lower totals, which is kind of interesting. If you filter it just by totals of 137 or lower, that's about 55% against the spread, with two teams who are 60% win percentage or higher. If you include the really high totals, it actually goes down to like 51 or 52%. So I'm kind of curious what your thoughts would be on why the lower totals would actually be better to the under there. Just I would think usually it's just elite defenses playing against each other in a spot like that. But what do you think about that one?
I totally agree. It's the end of the season, so these teams are vying for positions in their tournaments as well as possibly the big dance, right? So they're good teams, and the totals are being that the totals are lower. They play good defense anyway, so it just gets more important. As it's like that championship game total that was it's a really good trend to the under in championship games, and actually many sports. The defense steps it up more. The offense a little bit more jittery, but the defense travels, and the defense they play more defense. If you're really trying to win games, that's when defense comes in, and you can see that in the NBA too. So, does that sound like a logical explanation to you?
Yeah, I think it's you would also get a lot of the games in here where it's two teams like playing for a conference title. Maybe that's the game that decides who's going to win the regular season. Those are huge games for these teams. You're usually not going to be playing for a conference title if you don't have a good defense. So it kind of filters out those teams that just outscore teams with the really ridiculous high scoring games. But I think it's interesting. So in general, I think my biggest takeaway is bad teams late in the season, bet the over. Good teams late in the season against each other, bet the under. Obviously, that's not just something I'd bet blindly, but I'd be really careful if you're betting two teams that have won, a third of their games and you want to bet a low under. That's a pretty dangerous thing because late in the season, they could be quite a bit different than they were at the beginning of the season.
Yes, 100%. And real quick, Easy Baby 1988 says, seeing smart money on Baltimore, Baltimore, Maryland Retrievers, I believe. And I'm pulling it up. He said, you all agree. I don't see. I'm looking at the spread numbers. It looks like it's a little bit more towards Maine, so I don't see why that would be. If there was more smart money on the money line, I would think it might affect the spread some, but it just depends upon the book. But Kyle, any quick thoughts on that question?
That's a game that I didn't look at too in depth. UMBC and Maine is a pace war. Maine wants to play slow, win with defense. UMBC is just about as fast as anybody. They're jacking a ton of threes. Lots of variance in a game like that. So if you bet UMBC on the money line, I wouldn't blame you just because I could see lots of different ways that game could go. It's not a game against the spread that I would be terribly interested in betting on.
Yeah, I'm not. Unless there's an injury that I'm missing or something. And a lot of these injury sites, they do the best that they can. I mean, look, there's 362 teams. It's not easy, even for the sites itself. And they just collect data from Twitter and places like that, and it gets compiled. But, I'm not seeing any reason for it. So unless you know something, I don't. But if you ever know something, please tweet at me or DM me. I'd love to know what you know. Sharing information is always a big thing for me. So. That's good stuff. But no, I'm not seeing any injuries either for Maine. I guess Keelan Steele, but he's going to miss a month. I don't know how much he plays. I don't really watch a lot of Baltimore games, but that could be affecting it right there. So one of my sites did pick that up. Let's talk about Friday slate a little bit, Kyle. Actually, you know what? Before we get into Friday slate, I always like to talk about this. Buy low, sell high. Buy low, sell high is fun because, you're actually looking for value before the value comes. You're looking for it before the lines come out in some sense. So we'll do a few buy low and a few sell high teams. So for buy low, I'll go first, Kyle. Sometimes my guests appreciate that so they can kind of know exactly what I'm talking about. And I don't always mean futures. I just mean for the next couple games of betting. Kansas, believe it or not, I think they're somewhat buy low. And are you laughing, Kyle? That one?
That was on my notes too.
Okay. Well, it's always a good thing when I line up with a sharp man like yourself. So there we go. Kansas 17th on Ken Palm. I mean, just too much talent and too creative coaching. It's crunch time. It's blue blood time, right? Kansas is really picking it up and just showing that they finally could win away at Oklahoma. They're playing some defense. The color is fantastic. KJ Adams is good. Dajuan Harris is doing good. And Hunter Dickinson, man, it's time to shitter get off the pot, buddy. He had his greatest years when he was a freshman, believe it or not, in Michigan. But now he's kind of a little bit more of a role player. But the man is huge at 7'2". And if he just kind of takes a little bit more of a leadership role, in my opinion, play a little bit more defense, this Kansas team could go all the way to the Final Four simply. So yeah, one of them was Kansas for me. And nice, definite matchup against Texas at home, a team I don't like, and a team against BYU coming up, who's a fake team. Ole Miss is the next one after last night's loss. So they were a sell-high team for a while, Kyle, but now it's 70th on Ken Palm. I think they need a few big wins here coming up. They know that they've been, I guess, disregarded, somewhat disrespected, but let's face it, their non-conference was nothing, and their best win is now Florida. And they need a couple big wins. They got South Carolina on deck. They got Alabama on deck, both at home. So believe it or not, Ole Miss is going to be one of my buy low teams. 70th and Ken Palm, I think they're more in the 40s or 50s. I'm not so sure they're 70th in the nation, Kyle. I know they don't play a lot of defense, but they do have very good offense. And believe it or not, number 3 might shock you a little bit. Arkansas State. And Arkansas State, I mean, if you looked at what they've done lately, it's been pretty good. Arkansas State, believe it or not, at home, I mean, we always like the home road splits, and we look at those, and that's been the biggest topic probably of the betting year. But they're 145th on Ken Palm. They shoot 61.1% effective field goal at home. They won 5 of their last 6 games, and the one they lost was to James Madison, finally giving James Madison a game. They only lost by 4 points at home against James Madison. So they have an interesting game tonight at Troy. And then they have South Alabama on deck. But this team is kind of, picking it up at the right time. I think they're a little bit more dangerous than people think. So those are my buy low teams, Kyle. Who are yours?
Kansas was one of mine, so I'll start there. I think it's funny with all the team Kiev that, I had two of each written down, and that's one of the ones that we matched. I guess for Kansas, what I would add is, bet against Bill Self and Kansas at the end of the season at your own risk. We've seen this many times before. Yeah. Kansas is done. They're not good enough. The end of the Big 12, they win a couple games that people didn't think they were going to win, and they're still up there to tie for the conference lead or something like that. So, I'm not sure what they're going to do as far as the conference standings, but they're 11 and 15 against the spread. And I think that this is a good time to buy low on Kansas because, Self is such a good coach. Kansas has plenty of talent. I trust them here late in the regular season and when it comes to tournament time. So I think now is a good time to be looking to bet Kansas. The other team I had, Kiev, a little more under the radar, but obviously people know them as well. How about Furman? Remember Furman from last year when they won the first game against Virginia there in the NCAA tournament? Furman is 9 and 15 against the spread so far this year. The Paladins, a good veteran team. They've been here before. They just barely lost to Samford on Wednesday night. Samford's been really good this year, so they gave them a good game, covered the spread there. Furman has been badly banged up. They've had all kinds of injury problems. They are healthier now than they've been through the rest of the season. I think Furman's probably a good team to try to bet on here the rest of the regular season and through the conference tournament.
Oh, I like that one, Furman. Yeah, that sticks out too. So good stuff on there. Let's move on to sell high teams. And I'll let you go first. I don't steal any one of yours, Kyle.
All right. Well, you briefly mentioned this team when you're talking about Ole Miss. I'm going to go sell high on South Carolina. They're 18 and 8 against the spread. This is not me saying South Carolina is not a good team. It's me saying I think the market has them pretty highly rated at this point. Paris has done a great job with this team. Good coaching. They are 6th in luck factor at Ken Palm, though. We have to be honest that they've been at least a little bit lucky. The market's really high on them. They have some tougher matchups coming up, and I don't like them in the role of favorite. They've already lost some games that they shouldn't have lost. I think South Carolina, you mentioned that Ole Miss matchup coming up. I think they have some games coming up that don't look too favorable for them, in my opinion. And, a team that's 18 and 8 against the spread, Clearly a much improved team, but I think that they're a little bit overvalued in the marketplace now. So there's one for me. I'll go ahead and do the second too. The second team for me, Nebraska, 17-10 against the spread so far this year. Hoiberg's done a really good job too. And Nebraska's a good team. But Kiev, they just won their first game on the road in the Big Ten against Indiana. And I know Indiana's in this sad spot where, this is a program that they care a ton about college basketball. And, they should be better than they are. But Indiana is not good enough right now that we should be terribly impressed that Nebraska went to Indiana and won. I mean, this is not one of the good teams in the Big Ten. So playing away from home down the stretch and then the neutral site games and the Big Ten tournament, I don't trust Nebraska to win those type of games or to cover the spread in those games. They're 17-10 against the spread. They're a good team. They're certainly much improved. But again, this is a team that I think has gotten a little bit overvalued at this point.
Oh, without a doubt. I was looking at Nebraska too, and it's high for them. Now Hoiberg, I will give him credit. He really turned this team around, and this team has done enough now to make the tournament. So it's almost like they can go into relax mode here. I'd be very worried about them against a bad team like Ohio State coming up. Definitely worried about them at home against the best cover team in all of basketball in Minnesota, right? So, they're probably a fade team right now coming up. So totally agree with you, certainly on that one. I have a few myself, and just going to go. I said this one early in the season, and it came to fruition, but they climbed back up. So I'm going to knock them back down, Kyle, and it's Gonzaga. They're back to 20th on KenPom. I don't think they're a 20-rated team. I think that they have good coaching, and they're just in a very easy conference. Now, I know that there's some questionable officiating with that St. Mary's loss. I think St. Mary's is a very good team. So they'll have their chances again to face St. Mary's, and a lot of people will grab that road revenge angle that you and I talked about on Spaces on Monday night, which we are, by the way, doing Spaces Monday nights. If you guys ever want to tune into that, Mondays at 11 Eastern. But man, this is just a team that doesn't have that Drew Timme, right? They got some young guys there. They have some juniors there, some seniors, actually just one senior in Anton Watson, but this isn't the team that they used to be. And I'm not going to fade them tonight against Portland. Maybe I should, but against Santa Clara at home, people are going to say revenge spot. They're going to be laying 13, 14, 15 points. I think Santa Clara hangs with them again. Then they're going to have a really tough San Francisco game sandwiched into St. Mary's, right? You're going to have that just flat spot type thing. It's a semi-away game, meaning neutral court. That could be an under right there, just thinking about that. But, man, that's going to be an interesting game in San Francisco or against San Francisco as well. So I think they kind of could flutter down the crunch. Now, they got that big win against Kentucky. Kentucky, they're a very, let's just say, inconsistent team. But, no, Gonzaga, I still think isn't guaranteed in the tournament, Kyle.
I agree with you, and I think this is a good call. Kiev, that San Francisco game interests me quite a bit. If they're favored by 3.5 in a game like that, that's probably a good San Francisco spot. The Dons are good, and they're very capable of winning that game. That game's being played at Chase Center where the Warriors play, so it is still pretty much a home game for them. I think Gonzaga is definitely not the 20th best team in the country. I don't even think it's very close. And I like St. Mary's more. The fact that they're ranked below them in KenPom kind of surprises me. I think St. Mary's is better than Gonzaga. And Gonzaga's offense, while it is very good, they're not as good as they've been in past years. And we know their defense kind of lets them down against really good opponents, especially come NCAA tournament. Their defense does not look very good. Will they get to the NCAA tournament this year? Like you said, I don't think it's a sure thing at this point. And laying 13 or 14 against Santa Clara, scary. And then, man, if they win that Santa Clara game easy, I think we have a pretty good spot there against San Francisco.
Yeah, without a doubt, that would be fun. That would, that's kind of what you're looking at. Maybe you bet Santa Clara, and if you don't cover, you go harder on the next one, or if you do cover, you do the same bet or lower on the next one too. So kind of positioning your bets for spots is sometimes what I do as well, somewhat successful, but obviously great stuff to look at on this one. And finally, I have Texas A&M Commerce, Kyle. I know that's one of those kind of 100 teams that are kind of blown you away with. But 4 guys were suspended last night for 3 games, including their center, Jerome Brewer. And he's their second best scorer, best rebounder. Now, most of the guys suspended are just kind of role players, but this team's like, you look at there's injuries that aren't reported properly on injury sites. They're just kind of a mess right now. And I don't think the market's going to pick up on Texas A&M Commerce by Saturday when they play Nicholls State. So just wanted to throw one of those out there because I noticed it when I looked through the injury report, I'm looking through cluster injuries, and this really popped up as something significant, Kyle.
I love this one, Kiev. This is right down my alley. I would say that this is one of the reasons it's so much fun chatting with you on this, because we're not just talking about Duke and North Carolina and teams like that. But I mean, I think everybody or most people have seen the fight that happened after that last game. Those guys definitely did deserve to get suspended several games. That's pretty bad. And Texas A&M Commerce and Nicholls State, Houston Christian, Lamar, those games are going to be playing. Kiev, I'm pretty confident that a lot of the odds makers are just going to copy Ken Palm's number on that one. So if they do, I think fading them is a good spot. So I really like this one.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, glad to find that one in the woodwork here. So glad we agree on it as well. Let's talk some big games then. And it's so funny. Kyle texted me, and Friday looks terrible. Or something. He said something like that. It just looks bad. I mean, yeah, Nevada. You think there's a good Mountain West game? No, it's Nevada versus San Jose State. Yeah, nope, not so good, right? I mean, San Jose State's at home, but I don't know. I mean, that's the only way I would bet it. But Jesus, probably don't want to mess with that because Nevada thinks they're on the bubble too, right? That's a situation where they might put some big effort into it, even though it's away. I'm just gonna say a team that's been killing it for me, and believe it or not, Kyle, this team, and I think I said it this week, so my listeners are like, "Oh, you said it again." This team hasn't lost an away conference game. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Hasn't lost an away conference game.
No, they haven't lost an away game since December 2nd, I believe.
I don't know who you're talking about.
The Purple Eagles, my man.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Niagara. Okay.
Niagara. You look at them. Every single away game since their loss to Syracuse, which they covered, by the way, back on December 21st. I know they covered because I bet Syracuse, so I remember that. They have won away. I mean, it's not that they didn't cover. They covered and won every single away game, which is very strange because they lose to Siena at home, 359. They lose to Manhattan at home, 344. They lost to Iona at home by 3 recently. But they've literally beat St. Peter's on the road, Fairfield on the road, Quinnipiac on the road, Iona on the road. It's just an amazing trend that's been going with them. And I've been on them the last 4 bets in a row away. I'm probably not going to go away because they're on the road against Canisius on Friday. Ken Palm has them losing it by 1. I hope they're dogs by 1 because I'll be all over that baby, Kyle.
Man, that's a good one. I have noticed Niagara has been covering spreads a lot lately. I didn't realize they hadn't lost a game on the road there. Canisius doesn't have some great home court advantage either. And Kiev, I think I've said this one before on here. The MAAC road teams have done better in that conference than any other conference in the country. So I'm going to watch this one now, Kiev. I hope this is -1 for Canisius. I don't think it probably will be, but even Niagara -1 or something like that, I think that'd probably be a good look there in that one. The only game that kind of stood out to me as kind of interesting, Kiev, was Kent State and Akron. I mean, that's a big rivalry game. Kent has not been very good this year. They've underachieved. These games can get really chippy. We've seen fights in this game multiple times in the past. I tend to think Akron wins that game, but let's see how many they're favored by. Maybe the under. The first game, both teams shot better than they usually do. So I don't think we see 1.2 points per possession out of those teams again. So Akron and Kent under is my lean. But I will be fair and say, I looked at the Friday slate and I was like, wow, this is really bad. I'm looking forward to the Saturday games a lot more.
Without a doubt. I mean, Akron's ranked a lot higher, but I remember losing this overtime last year in overtime. Akron lost, and they didn't cover because of overtime. One of those overtime beats. I was on Akron last year in this exact spot. I was pretty upset about it. But they do get Kent State at home, and they're going to be the favorite now. So maybe one to watch for the fun. But I'm not sure if I'm going to bet it. Akron does play some defense. Kent State they used to be more of a speed team. They're actually a little bit slower this year. A little bit. I guess they lost a lot of players from last year, probably, Kyle, right? Does that make sense? They're a better team last year.
Yeah, the other thing that Kent has had trouble with this year, I mean, they're like about the shortest team in the country. I mean, they just don't have any big guys. So, the defense is not nearly what it used to be, but I just know intensity will be super high there. Also, opponents are shooting 81% from the line against Kent State in the conference. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. We've talked about free throw luck in the past. I mean, everybody's not going to shoot 81% from the line. So I think that one stands out a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely a fade free throws there for sure. Well, let's move on to Saturday's slate, the big day for betting. And I'm going to start right out with the best game, if that's okay, Kyle. Houston versus Baylor, at least the number one ranked game on on Haslametrics. One thing I like about Haslametrics is he ranks the games by power, really, and you see the top teams always in the best games. But here we are, Houston versus Baylor. I'm guessing Baylor's going to be about a 3-point dog at home, Kyle. Total is 137. I faded Baylor against BYU last night. Or was it the night before? One of those. But now I think I'm going to come back because I don't like Houston away. This is a big spot for Baylor. And it has a little bit more meaning for the Bears, Kyle, because LJ Cryer, LJ Cryer, he won a championship with Baylor as a freshman. He was more of a role player then behind Mitchell and what's his face, but he played a role, and he played with Baylor, which Baylor was a good team. Just kind of went from amazingly good, just absolutely holy cow, to a good / great team. And he did a senior transfer to Houston. It was probably amicable, but when it's in Baylor, I think it means less to LJ Cryer to go back to his home where he. If he could retire, he'd retire Baylor Bear. He wouldn't retire Houston Cougar. I think it's more bigger on the guys that lost him. They're going to be like, well, LJ Cryer, we're playing against LJ, right? I think that it almost favors them at home being like, we're not going to lay down to him, our buddy that left to another team. I almost think that's a better spot for Baylor here to D him up and play a little bit better D. Now, Baylor has a better offense than Houston. Houston's offense is suspect if they're not getting offensive rebounds. And it's pretty significant. I mean, Baylor 9th in effective field goal. Houston's 133rd. Baylor also gets their offensive rebounds, not so much on the defensive side, but they're also number 4th in second chance points. Now, there is no argument to Houston's defense, but the problem with the Big 12 and a lot of games this year is that I think part of the home field advantage is you're getting the whistles as a home team and you're not getting it as an away team. And if Baylor's going to be a home dog with 3 points, I can see them winning this game a couple different ways. Home road splits are big. 360th for Houston away from home on Haslametrics. Baylor 14th at home. I want the 3, Kyle. I'm going to look at the opener. Maybe you get better than that. Maybe you get the 3. I think it goes down. I think this would close at about a 1.5 or 2. But I'll take BY. I'll take Baylor to win this game.
The first thing I put in my notes for this game, Kiev, was I don't think Houston's going to be favored by 3 points like Ken Palm has it. So if it comes out at that, I don't think it'll last very long because people are going to want to take the home team plus the points here. So if you like that, I think you bet it early. I don't know that I want to bet a side in this game. I think I'd rather bet the under. 137 is what Ken Palm has. I really do trust Houston's defense. I mean, the only question with Houston, and you know this, Kiev, but how the officials call the game matters a lot because they're super aggressive on defense. If you get some of those guys that really want to call fouls quickly, it's going to go over because there are going to be so many free throws. So I wish we could know who the officials were going to be and what their tendencies were. We like to look at that for like the NFL, the NBA.
Well, college doesn't even release it.
I know. It's
morning of, and it's not even really released. It doesn't hit the news. I mean,
it's a shame. Yeah, it'd be nice. But it is what it is. We have to go without really knowing that. I think Baylor, though, has slowed down considerably in conference. Kiev, 19.2 seconds per possession, so they're not pushing pace at all. I see them as a team that is okay with winning lower scoring games. Their 3-point percentage in non-conference was upper 40s, and now in conference play, 34.5%. I think for Houston, and I think I like Houston a little bit better than Kiev does in general because I think it was even last year, which you ended up being right that Houston got knocked out of the tournament earlier. But Calvin Sampson's teams have been really good consistently. I think he's a very good coach. I think defense travels so much that I trust them to win games on neutral sites. Jamal Shed does not get enough love. People talk about LJ Cryer and how good he's been. Maybe he scores more points, but Jamal Shed's fantastic. I think he's the heart and soul of that team. So I'm not going to fade Houston in this game, but I think I'd like to buy Houston on these neutral site games coming up later because I do trust their defense to win them some games. We'll see when we get to bracket time this year, Kiev. Maybe I think I might have Houston out there a little bit farther than you do, but in this one, I think under is my favorite play.
All right, under. Good stuff. So Kevin asks, doesn't Merrimack minus 15 at home versus St. Francis, PA fit Kyle's 72% hit rate of good teams covering a team that has better than 50% against the spread?
Yeah, it does.
That's
Merrimack wasn't a 15-point favorite, I don't think, at the Open, but then it's been moved up. They're like 14.5 up to 15.5 here. So they're right on the edge of that. But yeah, it does fit. And they're past the game number where it's late in the season. So that one does fit. We'll see how Merrimack does there in that one.
All right. Well, there you go. We found one right away. Good job there, Kevin. Awesome. Yeah. Doing some research for that and bringing that into our attention. Really appreciate that. Let's move on to another game. Kyle, do you have a game to pick for Friday or for Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about BYU and Kansas State. BYU Kansas State is a game where BYU can't be trusted away from home. I think we know that. It's 355th according to Haslametrics in away from home rating. Now, Kansas State, this surprised me that they're 313th at home because we know that they've pulled off some big wins at home, but they've been wildly inconsistent too. They have some bad losses. Right. Which Kansas State team are we going to get in this one? It's kind of hard to say. I think BYU is so good at pushing pace that I think there will be points scored in this game. And for me, BYU's defensive numbers in the Big 12 really kind of tell the story. Remember at the beginning of the season when BYU was like 5th or 6th in Ken Palm at one point. They were clearly too high. There's no way they were that good. Their defense looked really good. Now their defense giving up 1.1 points per possession in the Big 12. I mean, that's not good at all. On the road, they've given up a ton of points. They still push pace. I think Kansas State would be the side I would want to bet here if I were taking a side. Team total for Kansas State over maybe. I will say, though, this is not like the strongest play or anything for me. I just think that BYU will push pace, but I don't trust their defense to stop them.
That's some great analysis because it lines up with what I'm thinking on this game as well. And Kansas State is in a good spot. It's not like they're winning a ton, but they need this game like blood to make the postseason. They're not out of it yet. They're close to out of it, but they're not out of it. But if you look at their wins, they're mostly against some, I guess, suspect teams, you would say, right? Not so good teams. They don't shoot the ball that well. That's their problem. But they at least hit about 49.9, almost 50% effective field goal when they're at home. But they rely on the defensive side of the ball, Kyle. They really do. And Ken Palm, their defensive efficiency ranks 14th. It's almost kind of like they're the Texas A&M of the Big 12 in a way. Is that a fair comparison? Kind of can't shoot the ball well, plays good defense. They do get some offensive rebounds. That's good. But if you look at their schedule, I mean, it's been a gauntlet, man. I mean, of course, Iowa and Houston, let's just talk about after January 20th, because they were mostly, a very good record. And then they went, they won one game out of like their last 9 since January 20th, but it was Iowa State away, Houston away, Oklahoma at home, yeah, that was a bad loss. Oklahoma State on the road, they lost by 3. Then they beat Kansas, maybe the best team, or no, not best, but second or third best team. Houston's the best team, let's face it. Houston, Iowa State, and then probably Kansas is how I had the Big 12, Kyle. They beat Kansas, which is a big win. Then they go to BYU and do their thing by losing. But that loss, Kyle, was only a 6-point loss. I mean, going to Provo and only losing by 6 points is kind of saying something. They lose a very tough last-second shot on Saturday at home to TCU, and then they lose to Texas on the road. Big spot for Texas. This is all Kansas State for me. And they do have a few small advantages. I think near proximity, they should be able to they should be able to score a little bit against BYU. And Kansas State, they defend the 3 very well. BYU is third in taking over 50% of their shots are threes. So if you're feeding into what Kansas State does well, ranking 4th in adjusted 3-point defense on Hasla, you have a good shot. So there's a few matchup things that I really like about Kansas State. Even though they're not the greatest shooting team, they can get some offensive boards, get some good second chance shots. And the spot, there is no bigger spot for them. This is they need this game or they're completely out, Kyle. So I'll be on Kansas State probably for maybe a little bit better than what you're saying for a sizable play, not max play, but a medium play.
Yeah, Kiev, I think it is a great spot. They lose several close games in a row. They got to win this one. Then they got coming up West Virginia, a winnable game at Cincinnati, who's been a bit inconsistent. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibilities that they could get a little streak going, but they have to win this game. And it's interesting to see some of the others projecting a line a little bit bigger than 3. So, if this gets up to 4 or 5 points here on Kansas State, I'd have to bet them for sure.
Oh, that would definitely be wonderful. I know that game we talked about before, Hasla has it at 4 and Bart Torvik has it at 5. So that's why I was kind of hoping for a 3 for Baylor, but I'm not sure if that. I still think you're right. I think this gets hit and goes down pretty quick. Well, the last game I picked was USC versus UCLA, Kyle. You want to start on this one?
Sure. Kiev, you want to trust USC? I mean, if you want to trust USC, then I'm going to let you trust USC by yourself here. I sure don't. I mean, I don't think UCLA is a great team. So I wonder what I don't know what Torvik or Haslam projected this one at. I'm kind of curious. Maybe you can even look at that one.
I'll look it up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But 4 is what Ken Palm has. And UCLA is not really a team that I want to lay a ton of points with because they do play a lot of close games. But I think that their style of play, they slow the game down, they win with defense. I think they're going to get to pick the style of play. USC kind of plays the opponent's style. And USC seems to have bad team chemistry. I mean, they go through these bad droughts. They might look good for a little bit. They can't put a full game together. And this one, the only thing I could bet would be UCLA or maybe the under or USC team total under or something. USC takes a lot of bad shots. I've watched enough of their games now to see that the quality of the shots that they take are just not very good. They have talent. We know that. They've underachieved a lot. Andy Enfield, has got to be on the hot seat here pretty soon because USC expected a lot from him. He had
can I stop you right
nice.
Yeah. Isn't it weird to see Andy Enfield's team ranked in the hundreds and Mick Cronin's team to be ranked 91? I mean, you would have looked at these two teams 3 years ago or 2 years ago, and you'd be like, "Are you serious? What the hell happened to them?" Right?
Right.
So it's interesting, but I think there's some distraction with USC too. I'll let you finish before I get into it.
Well, I mean, Kiev, look at the USC recruiting classes too. I mean, they've had some really high-rated recruiting classes. I mean, you can't have those kind of recruiting classes and set expectations where they were and finish where they are here without having some real issues. And USC, yeah, they picked up a home win over Oregon State. They won at home against Utah, who's played really bad on the road. I don't trust them here on the road at all. I don't know. I think this is a tricky one because I don't just sit there, Kiev, and think I want to lay points with UCLA because I know they play close games. They play low-scoring games. I will say, though, Mick Cronin has done a great job turning this team around from what – remember their loss to Utah where they lost by 50 points? A lot of guys would have lost the team. That would have been it. That would have been it for the season. The fact that they've turned it around, had a good season since then, and then lost the last game on a heartbreaker, right on the tip in, right at the very end of the game. I think this kind of sets up as a good spot. They had plenty of time to get ready for this game. So I think it's a UCLA situational spot.
Well, that tipping made my day just good instead of great on Sunday. I went 3-1 instead of 4-0, and I took the money line, so it did make it for me. It was like literally that Carlson tipping that ruined it. And I mean, he just was coming for the back. He's a tall guy. It was just cleaned it up and got it in. No time for UCLA to do anything. They're still young because they lost all their guys last year. They lost everybody, right? Jimmy Jaquez, right? Tyga Campbell. They lost everybody last year. And USC lost a lot of people too. Here's my angle with USC. And I'm not saying for sure I'm going to be betting this, but I'm going to lean at least USC. USC certainly has nothing to play for. If you look at 10-16, they're done. They haven't. I guess Seton Hall's their best win. Kansas State back in the first game of the season on November 6th. Utah is probably next. But here's the difference. Isaiah Collier is back. And Isaiah Collier came back for the Cal game. He played 27 minutes, and this went to overtime. He went to Cal and pushed it to overtime. And then Stanford was the second away game. Got absolutely lambasted. But then they beat Utah at home. And that's pretty impressive. And then Colorado, I think they're up by 20 points, Kyle, and choked it away to Colorado. It was something absolutely ridiculous that happened on Saturday or Sunday. February 17th it was. So that was on Saturday. People were talking about it, and they lost in 2 overtimes. Well, that shows me that they're still fighting a little bit. But this is also a rivalry game. Is it really that much of a true road game at UCLA? There's going to be some fans from them. It's two coaches that kind of know each other well. It makes me look towards the dog. And UCLA, as good as they played on defense, they still rank 331st in effective field goal. If you're laying north of 4 points with that kind of effective field goal to really anybody, I worry about you. Now, the whole Bronny James thing, I think that was a distraction for this team. But now it's kind of cooled off a little bit. Nobody expects him to come out and just be like LeBron James, right? He's going to be like Bronny James and sit on the bench. And I don't even know if the kid could actually make the NBA. Is he going to leave this year? Jesus. I mean, he'll have to play in the G League for a while or whatever. But, I mean, maybe he's not. That's a whole other discussion. I think the kid needs to go back to college and learn some things. But personally, I think 4 points might be too much. So I'm going to lean USC. But I wanted to mention this game because of the two coaches that completely fell off the watermelon wagon, and that we looked at as top guys. Hell, USC was a top 4, top 3 team for a couple of years in a row there. So very interesting situation, isn't it?
It is. And I see 4.5 or 5 projected some places. I don't think I can lay that many points, Kiev, but I don't know. I mean, if I don't bet it, I'm going to root for you on USC, but it just worries me to back USC. I don't trust them. They had a 16-point lead there against Colorado with like 15 minutes left in the game. Colorado's been terrible on the road. You know that. So blowing that game hurt quite a bit. I don't know. This would have been a great game in the past, and now, it's kind of an under-the-radar game.
By the way, do we have the cojones to play Washington State tonight? I mean, against Arizona. I mean, they've been just playing amazingly, right? Yeah. But, I mean, Arizona is a pretty good favorite, but it's not like an 18-point favorite. It's like they're at home, and Arizona has just been lambasting people, and they lost to Washington State. But, I mean, if Washington State is really the 34th best team, you would play it. But I'm not sure if they are either. Just wanted to throw that out there for a game tonight.
Yeah, I don't think I would trust Washington State there. I do think Washington State's a good team, very well coached, but it's a pretty good spot there for Arizona.
So, want to do some hodgepodge then? Unless you have another game that you circled,
sure.
Let's talk about some hodgepodge. UConn Villanova. Nova was a fade team for me. They bit me a couple times. I did play Butler the other night, and I mean, Butler that's one team I just haven't won on, and I got to stay away from Butler. It's tempting, But I think that the problem with Nova is they're not really that big inside, and that plays into what UConn's good at with Klingon. You know, he's 7'2". He is an absolute force inside. When Samson Johnson's in, he's a force inside. And Nova, God, they rank 358th in block percentage on offense, getting blocked, and only 282nd on defense. You know, it's like, what are you guys gonna? What kind of answer are you guys gonna have for away against Klingon? You know, this was interesting because they did play them well against UConn in the middle of the season. They lost by 1 point. They kind of hung there. They uglied up the game a little bit, but this almost is like a spot play for UConn, but you're going to be laying 9 or 10. Anything that, I mean, this is probably the second best game, if not the first best game for Saturday. What are your thoughts?
I think maybe under. I mean, the possessions in that first game, 59 possessions. So Villanova wants to play slow. UConn can play at any pace and win. I mean, I think that's what makes them good. They can win those high-scoring games. They can win the low-scoring games. Doesn't really matter. In general, their pace is pretty slow. But 59 possessions in the first game, they actually shot fairly well in that game. You know, if we see a 135 or something like that in this total, I think I would probably lean to the under. As far as the side, Kiev, I don't like betting Villanova games too much because I think they're one of the most inconsistent teams. Like, you know, they have some really good wins. They have some really bad losses. Which Villanova team is going to show up? Is it going to be the one that lost to Drexel or Penn? Or is it going to be the one that, you know, beat Creighton on the road? Or, you know, I mean, I don't know, or beat North Carolina. So as far as the side, and you also could argue that obviously this is a fantastic bounce back spot for UConn off of that loss. So I don't know about the side.
I think I would take UConn, but we'll see. I mean, if it's already like, if that's going to play into the line, which it probably will, then in their 12-point spreads, I would look more towards the under. That's for sure, you know, because the under is not always looked at like that. So, yeah, that's, I mean, unfortunately, the under is going to be 133, 135, something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
So, that makes sense. Another weird situation, Auburn at Georgia. Auburn finally, just a terrible performance against Kentucky, and they had a week to think about it. Now they have to go to Georgia. Georgia's a good home team, but they choke at the end. Just one of those Auburn or nothing probably for me. I don't know. I see a lot of high variance in this game too. Auburn was getting a little high up there too. They might be a top 4 team. I would probably say they're a top 8 team. I don't know. It's just interesting how we would rank these teams, man. You know?
I think Janai Broome is so good on defense that it's really helped that team a lot. But their offense, I mean, away from home, they haven't been that good. Do we really trust Auburn and neutral sites when you get to the tournament? I don't know. Pearl hasn't been tremendous in those spots in the past, anyways. You know, Auburn has been fantastic at home. Obviously, they lost the game to Kentucky, but they'd been blowing out everybody else. I don't think I can lay 9 points with Auburn in this game, though. I mean, Georgia's a pretty talented team with some nice wins. They won against South Carolina. That was they won on the road, at South Carolina there in that one. Then they lost at home to them. They've been pretty inconsistent. I don't know what I'm going to get from them. 146-ish total. I mean, I don't know. Do you bet under? It's hard to bet a Georgia under. They push pace, not very good on defense.
Oh yeah. If they're hitting threes, they're on. If they're not, then it's under. You know, it's just
it's tough. Can I bring up another game here?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we haven't said anything about what some people would think could be the biggest game: Alabama and Kentucky.
I'm looking at that now. Thank you.
All right. So we're thinking alike again. I like it. Alabama's been scoring so many points. I mean, this total is going to be like 178 or 178 and a half or something ridiculous. But what interests me about this game is, Kiev, you know, Kentucky's defense had been so bad. It looks to me like the last couple of games they've kind of slowed the pace down on purpose. You go to play Auburn and you play a 67 possession game. That's kind of weird when you look at the overall possessions for both teams. I mean, both of those teams have been playing tons of games in the 70s as far as pace. Then Kentucky goes to LSU, another team that plays quick, 71 possessions because it kind of sped up there at the end of the game. That was a wild, really good game. But I'm gonna hate myself if I bet it and it loses. But you know what I'm gonna say. I mean,
I know what you're gonna say. Under.
I think I kind of lean the under in this game. Like, obviously, it could finish 100 to 95, and it wouldn't be shocking. But I mean, can you bet over 178 or
Well,
something? I mean, that's gonna be
you have.
ridiculous.
I mean, here's the thing: when you have two fast teams play against each other, it's multiplication. It's not addition, right? It really. But Alabama plays good defense. They have played good defense. I know they don't always play good defense, but they've stopped A&M to 75 points even with a fast pace. They Ole Miss 67 points. Their defense definitely took a hit, but I looked at them as playing pretty good defense, at least in the beginning of the season. Kentucky defense has improved and their pace went down. So it says to look at the under if you look at recent trends. I bet you if we pull up the Bart Torvik stuff on them, it does show a pretty big curve. Defensive efficiency up for Kentucky and pace definitely going down a little bit. Yeah, the curve is certainly going down for Kentucky for pace. It always goes down because of the non-conference, but there's a little bit of if you look at 5-game rolling average on Torvik, it definitely shoots to the under here. 67, like you said, against Auburn here. And I mean, they haven't had a above 74 possession game since Gonzaga or since Georgia. Even Gonzaga was probably a little bit lower, so
71, yeah.
71. Yeah. So yeah, I mean it's hard to get to 178 points. You have to be almost perfect, and if you're playing under 75 possessions, that's not going to be easy. So
well, Kiev also Kentucky switched up the lineup a decent amount and put in that Diero, the big guy that has been a good shot blocker. 4 blocks there against LSU. I think he's limited offensively compared to some of the other guys, but he's so good defensively. It helps them quite a bit. I guess I'm curious too. What do you think of the side in this game? I mean, so Bama's probably going to be favored at Kentucky.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, Kentucky doesn't really lose too often at home, do they? That's where they've been very good. The losses were really away. They haven't lost one home game since Clemson back on November 28th. Yet they haven't played anybody at home. Their toughest home SEC game was Florida, and it went to overtime, right? Or sorry, I was looking at Alabama. Yeah, Alabama's actually the one that loses away. So Kentucky, they lost a good Gonzaga. That's it. Now I would say I'm going to stay away from the side.
Yeah,
I would stay away from it. Yeah, I have no reason. I can see both teams winning, a little bit more variance with the speed, right?
Yeah, I think I stay away from the side too. I mean, do you want to lay points at Kentucky? Probably not. Kentucky's upside's still really high. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if Kentucky makes a run in the tournament. Still a very good team.
Yeah, sorry. So when I was looking at Alabama actually being on the road, that's where they do lose. So they did lose at Auburn and at Tennessee. But the truth is like that's Auburn and Tennessee, 2 top 7 teams. Kentucky is not exactly a top 7 team. So yeah, I would stay away from the side of this one. Saturday, there's Iowa State is another weird one. I mean, they're going to be massive spread against West Virginia, but this is just another big team that just lost. Now, granted, they lost to Houston, but it's funny. You see Auburn, UConn, and Iowa State all coming up losses from their last game for their big situation here. Here's an interesting one. North Carolina at Virginia. And according to Haslametrics, it's a 3.5 point spread. Man, Virginia burned me a couple times recently. I was kind of on them as a buy low team, and then they were actually at their peak. Sometimes that happens. You mispredict them a little bit. And they lost to Pittsburgh at home. They only beat Wake by 2 at home, and they lost to Virginia Tech away. Now, Virginia is a really good home team, but I mean, North Carolina, dude, it's like you were just looked at as a Final Four team at the end of January. Then you lose to Georgia Tech, you lose at home to Clemson, and then you lose away to Syracuse. Now, they did go home and beat Virginia Tech. I could only look to North Carolina. Ken Palm has it 4, though. I don't want to lay 4 points on the road either.
Yeah, I would lean North Carolina in this game. I think Virginia has been bad enough in several of these games. You lose by 11 at home to Pitt, 49-47 against Wake Forest, really slow. I don't think it's too likely that they can hold North Carolina to a really low number. So they're going to have to score a decent amount of points here. I have to lean North Carolina in that game.
It just depends. If the refs are calling fouls on Virginia's really lockdown defense, then yeah. But if they're not, they could just knock. And this is what Virginia does. They knock people off their games and with that amazing defense. And it's easier to, like you always say, Kyle, it's easier to slow teams down more than speed them up. And North Carolina would like to speed them up, but it's probably going to be a little bit slower. And if you get into their confidence, that's where Virginia can try to get that big win. Interesting game. Probably stay away from it, but I would also, if this gets in the high, middle, it says 130, but if this gets to 133, I might look towards the under here. I think Virginia can slow them down or not score. That's what you're hoping for, not score, right? Virginia doesn't take a lot of threes, right? They're 30th in 3-point percentage, but they're only ranked 309th in attempted threes. If they're not taking a lot of threes, I mean, that's where it goes under, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'd bet the total in that game. It's such a pace war. It is easier to slow teams down than it is to speed them up, especially if you're the better team. I don't really think they're the better team, so probably a pass on the total there.
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk about Sunday's slate a little bit then. And I also gave you some hints on some of my, buy low, sell high. Probably looking at Kansas, obviously, can't hint for Saturday. Sunday, man, there's some great games on Sunday. Marquette Xavier is going to be interesting. Marquette's at home. You got Michigan against Ohio State. What is Ohio State now that they fired the coach? One that I wrote down was Creighton versus St. John's. And, St. John's was kind of a fade team lately, but now what is Creighton after this big win against UConn? Because Creighton, if you look at some of their stuff, they've faltered themselves in bad positions, losing to Providence away, they went to overtime against Seton Hall away, and they lost to Marquette away. That's fine. But that home loss to Butler was really weird. I think they did figure it out, though. But now they're going to St. John's away. And Rick Pitino, I don't know if you saw some of the news on him, dude. He said some really bad stuff about his kids. Like saying this guy can't do this, this guy can't do that. I don't want to even repeat necessarily. I can't remember exactly, but yeah. I mean, dude, what do you think about this? St. John's is going to be a 3-point home dog to Creighton. What do you think?
This is a really interesting game. When you said that we were going to talk about this one, I thought about this one for a little bit because Kiev Creighton would have been a buy low team for me before they beat UConn. We did talk about Creighton on Spaces earlier this week. Like you said, on Twitter, X, we do this Spaces there on Monday nights. So definitely tune into that if you're interested. I think Creighton has a really high upside, but Creighton has been wildly inconsistent. I mean, if you look at consistency, I was pulling it up on Haslametrics, they're 326 out of 362 in consistency. What are you going to get from Creighton? I mean, you're coming off that massive win. I think Creighton is better than St. John's, but I don't know how is St. John's going to respond, because I did see, Patino was just trashing them. I mean, that was definitely more than usually you'll see coaches, say a few things just to try to fire up the team. I think that was pretty excessive.
It was, and I don't know how this guy with so many bad check marks against him can keep getting good jobs. I say you live bet this. And it might be a good live betting game. Like, there's nothing you can give out to subscribers or tweet out beforehand, but you can do it while. I think you're going to kind of see where Creighton's head's at after the letdown spot. Is Creighton saying, you know what, we want to make that 2 seed. We have a big win against UConn. We have Marquette on deck at home. We can keep rolling here, or is this total letdown? You're going to find that out in the first 5 minutes. And what's way more important, you're going to find out what St. John's is about, how they're reacting, because maybe this does fire them up and they listen to Pitino, or maybe these kids are being like, give them the big middle finger. And I think just the first couple points, even not even 5 minutes in this game, might be a good decision. It's just so interesting coming off the letdown on one side and coming off the coach insulting you on the other side. Oh man, sports these days, Kyle. All right, last game I want to mention. Rutgers is going to be playing Maryland, Kyle. And Haslametrics has the total a huge number at 121 points. So is this total even too low for the Kyle Hunters in the world to bet? I mean, I think you and I used to bet Liberty totals under this, but, I'm not so sure about this one.
Okay, Kiev. So Ken Palm has 119 for this one. And as I'm thinking about this, I think I can foresee this one opening at 121. And then I think what'll happen is it'll go up to 125 or 126. So if you want to bet over, you want to bet this right away. You also could possibly get a middle in a game like this because really low scoring game, points are at a premium. If you get over 121, under 126, you're in a pretty good spot. I think I would like the under if it gets bet up to 126, but I can't bet under 120 or 121. I mean, everything has to go right in that case. And this one, though, I think I like the side better. Rutgers is good at home, and Rutgers has Williams added to the fold at this point. I think he's a pretty nice boost to them. He's only played 5 games now. They're the second-ranked defense in the country. Do I want to trust Maryland on the road? I certainly don't want to trust Maryland on the road. Jameer Young is fantastic. They don't really have good other options. And Rutgers -1 is what Ken Palm is. Rutgers got to be favored by more than 1 point in this one, but
it's going to be two. I think 2.5 or 3.
2.5 or 3 is probably fair.
I think it's wishful thinking to get Rutgers -1 here. Kind of like I'm trying to wish. I'm trying to wish Houston to be 3-point favorites on the road at there. Wishful thinking, my man. Well, you look at the last game. It went to 67 possessions, even though it went to 109.
Yeah.
So that makes you this definitely could have went over if they were just shooting a little bit better. 23% from 3 for Rutgers, 11% for 3 from Maryland, and both teams under 45% from 2. I mean, that's how this thing went under. But 67 possessions, that tells me if they play like that and just play an average game, it should go over 120 points. I would say that's a great call. I say bet the over early, and if it goes to 124 to 125 and you have a 3 to 4 point middle, go for the under. Maybe you can double up on that. You eliminate that possibility of losing your full bet. You just lose a little juice on that one. But that is a positive EV situation because you got 3 points in the middle there. I don't care what anyone says. Any under that low of a total with a 3-point middle is definitely a positive EV situation. Now, Rutgers has a player that they've been playing with a couple games now. I forgot the name.
Williams.
Yes, Williams. Yes, and he wasn't with the team for most of the year. I think he wasn't eligible, right?
Yeah. Transfer.
He was a transfer, and then he's been doing pretty well for this team so far. Jeremiah Williams, right? And he didn't play until February 3rd, as a matter of fact. And once he played, they rip up 4 wins in a row against Northwestern. That loss that Maryland had at Wisconsin, that was like an 8-point game. And then they went to Foul City. Wisconsin kept missing. They had 3 threes in a row, and they almost won that game. And so that's not going to happen again. Maryland is a bad road team. So even though they covered against a really weird Wisconsin team, I hate to say, Wisconsin's probably a little overrated too. I would say that Rutgers -3 is what I would like. I would go up to 3 personally if I was going to play this side. But it's going to be interesting because Sunday is actually a halfway decent slate because it's bigger than other ones. There's no NFL. So you got, Nebraska against Minnesota, right? You got Minnesota going to Nebraska, and Minnesota 22-3 against the spread. Are you kidding me? We'll see what they do tonight. Then you got some of the obviously smaller conferences playing. Wichita State against Temple. You got that game. You have Michigan State against Ohio State. And I already mentioned Marquette versus Xavier. So there's some pretty good games. South Florida against SMU. So South Florida last week was my buy low team, and I'm glad I bet them on Sunday. But SMU is interesting because they're ranked way higher than South Florida. They have SMU as a road favorite. I don't think that's going to happen either. But this could be a place to pick off South Florida, close to pick them, Kyle.
Yeah, I think about the Rutgers game again, real quick. It depends on how Rutgers plays against Purdue tonight, too. I mean, I kind of hope Rutgers just gets blown out against Purdue.
Me too.
Because I'd love to see 1.5 or 2 there against Maryland. I think that'd be pretty good. As far as the others, South Florida has been a great story. Abdur Rahim's a tremendous coach. Remember what he did last year at Kennesaw State, to turn it around so quick at South Florida with some of the same guys. Fantastic stuff. And I think the American Conference is better than most people think. There are several pretty good teams there. Florida Atlantic, obviously still capable of doing big things. You got South Florida up there playing well. SMU, Charlotte's a good story. Some good teams, some great games there in the American.
It's interesting because they lost teams like Cincinnati and UCF to the Big 12, yet they're still maybe better than the Atlantic 10. It's interesting to see these guys rise up, right?
It is. There's several conferences like this. Think of the Mountain West. The Mountain West is better than some of those power conferences this year. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And some people are still going to say, well, the Mountain West has been bad here and there, in past years. Mountain West is pretty good. So I think the Mountain West will do better than some people think in even the big dance this year. It's interesting to see the movement year to year. But yeah, people thought the American Athletic would suck this year. And they lost some of the best teams for sure, but they're still a good conference.
Oh, without a doubt, my man. Well, that's all the time we have. We broke down a whole lot of games. Hopefully you got some information, but if you want the best of what Kyle has to offer, make sure you check out Kyle. And Kyle, where can we find your great information and plays?
Yeah, you can check out everything over at huntersportspicks.com, my website. Got a free picks newsletter as well. I haven't been putting out too many of those, but going to pick that up here. And I'm also going to do some contests come March. So free contest for some cash prizes. Sign up for those. Not sponsored or anything, Kiev. I just said people are like, who's sponsoring this? This is from my budget. That's fine. I just kind of want to have some fun with it. But I will say that, usually I've done well in March. So hoping to do well again in March. And it's been kind of an up and down season for me. I started good, then had a horrible slump. Have been doing better here again lately in general, but kind of up and down, streaks and slumps. You know how it goes, Kiev, but working hard, up a little bit on the year. Looking forward to March. You can go over to huntersportspicks.com. Also, if you don't follow me on Twitter, at Kyle Hunter Picks. And like Kiev said, check out the spaces that we do on Monday nights. I feel like there's some pretty good information shared there.
Make sure you check that out. We have a great time on Spaces, and Tuesday's been a pretty good slate of college basketball coming up. But more importantly, man, these Monday Spaces, we're going to be very busy during March, but I expect that we're still going to be doing some. So you're going to get some of the information that we have that we studied all day on Sunday after Selection Sunday, and for the big conference tournaments coming up. These Mondays are going to become more and more important because we're going to be talking about some futures as well as some money line rollovers coming up into it. So Kyle, thanks again, my man. We'll be texting this weekend.
All right. Thanks a lot, Kiev.